Happy Freedom Day, everyone. How's it going? We won't be doing a lot of preamble on this one. We're basically just going to hop right in. I was already talking with George over there on the Rumble chat, so I'm just, hey man, I'm happy everybody's here and everybody that's going to catch us stuff in the future. Happy Freedom Day, everyone.
About an hour left.
Going? We won't be doing a lot of preamble on this one. We're basically on this RFK town hall, so if you guys want to watch everything there on the Rumble chat, so I'm the background filled in a couple of gaps here, and everybody that's going to catch us stuff. Happy Freedom Day, everyone.
Should be able to get through it left.
Sped up just a lot of preamble on this one. On this RFK town hall, so if you guys want to watch everything in the rotation, go ahead in the background.
Change the recording
happy
with
gas
we
here.
left off last time.
Happy Freedom Day, everyone.
Should be able to get through it left.
Sped up just a lot of preamble on this one. On this RFK town hall, so if you guys want to watch everything in the rotation, go ahead in the background.
Change the recording
happy gas
we left off last time.
Happy Freedom Day, everyone.
Should be able to get through it left.
Sped up just a lot of preamble on this one.
Really good
on this RFK town hall,
so
so if you guys want to watch everything in the rotation, go ahead in the background.
Change the recording
happy gas
we left off last time.
Happy Freedom Day, everyone.
Should be able to get through it left.
Just playing this one right here. Okay, that was atrocious. Yeah, double audio. Okay, that must be me on the Rumble side. Is that better? Yeah, no, that's better, because I can hear myself in my ears. Holy shit, yeah, that was atrocious. Okay, now everything should be better. Let me know. Okay. Holy fuck. Yeah. No, should be good now. Cool. Yeah, so. Okay, I guess I probably had, yeah, that audio going. Got this one going right there. So, yeah, okay. Let's fucking roll.
This takes us to a question from Sandy Muller, a stay-at-home mom in Chicago. Might be interesting given what you just said.
All right.
Your father and uncle were heroes in the Democratic Party. Would they be considered Democrats today? And are you shocked by how you're being treated by the Democrats and their media?
Oh, they would definitely. And I've seen this answer clipped up a couple of different times, and I think I mentioned it on Sunday, but recently seen, what was that, The Atlantic? That stupid fucking commie rag go out there and put that RFK Jr. is the first ever MAGA Republican. See if I can get that one pulled up in the background.
I'm not happy about it, but I'm not shocked. I know, people get subsumed in orthodoxies. I believe that the values that I am trying to promote are the exact values that my father and my uncle would have promoted. And I've, written books about my family. I've studied them. I have, the more that I've studied my family, the more I've written and researched them, my uncle and my father, the more proud I am of them. And I have devoted my life to promoting the same kind of values that I think they promoted. And I'm trying to, one of my purposes in running is to remind the Democratic Party of, what we are supposed to represent and what we've always represented. And, people have said to me, why don't you run as an independent? And I say, because I'm a Democrat. This is who I am. This is my identity, but I want my party back. I want my party to be the party that I grew up in, the party of John Kennedy, the party of Robert Kennedy, the party of FDR, and Harry Truman.
You say that you're a Democrat, but you're getting a lot of support from a lot of leading voices on the right, like Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, former President Donald Trump.
Oh my
Many
God.
Democrats fear that you're a spoiler in the race.
See, Alex Jones, aren't you guys scared? Ended up finding that, okay, just so you guys don't think that I'm, a total fucking... gotta go through here. Really doesn't much matter. It's just a whole bunch of other stuff. They got it right there. Yeah, first MAGA Democrat. Oh my God, The Atlantic. You guys are so fucking pathetic. I might do a video on that one specifically because it's just so asinine. But what else do you expect from the fucking Atlantic?
You will damage President Biden in the primary and grease the skids for former President Trump to return to the Oval Office. This week, former President Trump said about you, Kennedy is smart and he's a common sense guy. What kind of man do you think Donald Trump is?
Well, that just sounds very nice, but yeah, because as we figured out on Sunday, News Nation it's supposedly independent, but then at the same time you also employ Chris Cuomo, Don Lemon, and this interviewer was getting a little bit too amorous with some of her questions and starting to dig in a little bit. So I guess that's supposed to be a bit of a jab.
Well, here's what I'm not going to do in this race. I'm not going to attack other people personally. I don't think it's good for our country. And I think, what I'm trying to do in this race is bring people together, is to try to bridge the divide between Americans. And guess what? The You know, when my dad died and we took this train ride from, you know, this 7.5-hour train ride that was supposed to be 2 hours, and I was with him when he died in Los Angeles, and then we brought his body from New York, Penn Station to Union Station in Washington, D.C. And it was a 2.5-hour ride, but it took 7.5 hours because there were 2.5 million people on that train track. And it was a cross-section of America in all of the major urban stations in Trenton, Newark, Wilmington, and Baltimore. There were black Americans singing Battle Hymn of the Republic. There were whites in the rural areas who were holding up signs, Goodbye Bobby, Pray for us Bobby, American flag, standing, saluting. 4 years later, and they had supported my father in the primaries in 1968. 4 years later, in 1972, they were not supporting my father, and they were not supporting George McGovern, who was aligned with my father on all these issues.
Oof.
Instead, the vast majority of
George McGovern, by the way, if you guys don't know, he was the guy who got BTFO'd by Reagan in '84. So, oof.
them were supporting George Wallace, and you know,
Not
my
the
father was
comedian,
able to
George
harness
Wallace.
these populist energies. In the last day of his life, he won the most rural state in this country, South Dakota, and the most urban. He was able to bridge the divide among people who would otherwise be Republican, but wanted somebody who was common sense, who was able to appeal to their idealism, who was able to find the hero in each of them, who was able to get them to transcend narrow self-interest and see themselves as part of a community and part of this, you know, incredible American adventure in modeling self-governance for the rest of the world. And so I'm proud that President Trump likes me, even though I don't agree with him on most of his issues, because I don't want to alienate people.
See, that's like being a sensible individual, knowing that he's most likely, if by hook or by crook, you know, something that the Kennedys are very familiar with. But if RFK Jr. does ultimately end up getting the nomination, knowing that that's going to be the guy standing across the stage from him during debates, it's like, okay, cool. What would you rather do? Okay, go up against somebody who you lambaste as being an idiot, a warmonger, a criminal, and then, okay, play that out. Okay, you're out there debating, and then say you lose or you look stupid to somebody that you labeled as a loser, idiot, warmonger, criminal, then that just kind of denigrates you. So just by staying neutral, saying that, hey man, he's obviously accomplished a lot, just give, you know, vague platitudes, it'll just make you ultimately end up looking good. So
People, I want to bring people together. I'm proud that all these people like me and that I have independent supporters and Democratic supporters and that I'm able to bring a lot of people. You know, every Democrat says, I want to end the polarization. But how do you do that without talking to people who don't agree with you? How do you do that without appealing to people? My purpose is to find the issues, the values that we have in common, rather than, you know, focus on the issues and the personalities that keep us all apart.
As a lifelong Democrat, as you just said very passionately, will you pledge to support whoever the Democratic nominee is, whoever it is, whether it's you, whether it's President Biden?
Oh, of course I'm not going to do that.
Oh, of course not. No, have you seen the previous two DNC elections and the fact that Bernie got BTFO'd in both of those under dubious circumstances? Fuck no, I ain't signing on to that shit. Are you crazy?
No, of course I'm not.
If
Listen,
you don't get the nomination, you won't support President Biden?
I don't know what I'll do. Let's see let's see what happens in this campaign. Let's see, you know what.
That's smart. More than likely, he's just going to end up going, yeah, Biden's our guy, you know, all that stuff. And, you know, he's probably best for the nation, whatever the fuck he wants to do at the end of it. But you also got to keep your negotiation position open. It's like he sees himself going up in the polls, and then he sees Biden going down in the polls. And on Saturday, even though I already got a nice video earmarked, it's going to be a little bit of a change of pace because obviously I can tell right now RFK Town Hall's fucking viewership cancer. But George, at least you're here, so I got somebody to talk to, so that's fantastic anyways, and I look forward to just talking with anybody who shows up anyway, so it really doesn't much matter if we have 6 or 60 or 600 people eventually start to turn up to this stuff. I don't really fucking care. I'm a man of my word, and I said we were going to do this, and fuck it, we're going to be doing this, and that's what RFK's doing right there. He has some different positions from what your mainstream current day Democrat, and like George, you and I were talking about in the chat there for a second ago, whenever you hear the word Democrat now going forward as somebody who is kind of an independent thinker in and of themselves, you get that visceral reaction, and it's like, ugh, statist, the yuck. But yeah, it's become a slur, justifiably so, of course. But if there's some sensible people that are left, like Tulsi Gabbard wasn't all that bad, you know, except for her gun-grabbing proclivities. Same with RFK Jr., doing the exact same stuff, and then also, yeah, just having a couple of fucking borked opinions. But he's better than everybody else that's out there, by a lot. So, if you can go ahead and redeem that, cool. And if not, well, oh, you're a lifelong Democrat until you're not, right?
If people are living up to democratic values and having debates and having discussions and, you know, talking to each other, but I'm not going to buy.
If that's not happening, would you then support a Republican or run as an independent?
You know what? My plan is to win this election, and I don't have a plan B.
Okay. We are in Chicago, which will be the host to the Democratic National Convention next summer. It is also where President Biden came today to unveil his economic blueprint. He's calling it Bidenomics. The economy is a huge issue with voters of all.
Oh my God, I don't know if you guys seen that press conference or even stills from it. It was like, wow, it takes absolute balls. Last time that anybody put their surname and onomics next to it, it was actually like a winning strategy with Reaganomics. So there's nothing original at all about Joe Biden. He's been a plagiarist for decades at this point in time. So why would he? Well, you can't teach a geriatric, dementia-ridden dog old or new tricks.
Stripes across the country. And that leads to our next question from George, a home builder and contractor in the Chicago area. Hi, George.
No, George is in the chat. He's not asking that question.
Hello. Everywhere I look, prices are sky high, from gasoline to groceries to building materials. Inflation and the uncertainty which it brings with it is damaging our economy. What is your plan to reduce inflation?
Yeah, thank you, George. I have a long-term plan and a short-term plan, but the current plan, which is to raise interest rates dramatically and to end the quantitative easing, I think is really doing tremendous damage. I was in Cleveland yesterday meeting with African-American business people in a community called the Lee Harvard community. And one after the other, they were getting up and telling me, one of them was a woman who had operated for 4 generations, 80 years, a sausage company that was very, very successful. She just had to, and it was bringing lots of prosperity to her community and lots of jobs. She just had to close it down because she couldn't get a bank loan. She couldn't get a bank loan because the interest rates are high, and the little banks, the ones that will loan to small businesses, their treasury bills have now been degraded in value, and they're scared about their targets for takeover. Their stocks have dropped 80% because of the heightened interest rates, and they're not loaning money anymore. And there's no money available to people who need it. And so,
it's not very often where you hear a politician actually relay a reasonably relatable anecdote in such detail. Normally you'll just get those vague pleasantries, or you'll just get the Joe Biden, Corn Pop was a bad dude. So it's very refreshing to hear something a little bit different, okay? Like, it's not all that, heartstring tugging or anything like that. I'm listening to it, and it's like, okay, cool, get on with the point. But you can tell he's made that actual genuine connection. Like, this isn't a fake story at all. So again, authenticity is it's the currency of the realm at this point in time. And yeah, that's why Trump has such an organic base. That's why RFK has such an organic following, and everybody else as well. Bought and paid for. Just take a look at what's happening with Ron DeSantis right now, which if there's time remaining at the end, we might take a look at one of the more hilarious recent trends, and holy fuck is that campaign sinking. And like I prognosticated, guess who's coming up in third place right now?
what we've done, we've sandbagged Americans. You're right. And why do we have inflation? We have inflation because of the continuous wars.
Wait, what specifically would you do to lower inflation?
Well, number one, I'm going to wind down the American empire and start. We've spent $8 trillion on the Iraq War and the wars that followed, and we spent $16 trillion on the pandemic. On the lockdown, the lockdown cost us $16 trillion, and we got nothing for it. We got nothing for the Iraq War. We ended up killing more Iraqis than Saddam Hussein.
But I'm talking about with people in grocery stores tonight. What are you going to do to bring down the prices of the food and the gasoline that they're paying for, in the immediate future?
Well, the only way that we can do that is by reducing inflation. And inflation is not going to be reduced overnight. What we need to do is stop spending money on things that we can't afford.
Yo, a Democrat saying that? What fucking time? Oh, right. Yeah, he's a conventional Democrat, I guess.
We're borrowing now $1 billion a day from the Chinese and the Japanese in order to fund the debt. The debt this year is going to cost us $660 billion, more than $500 billion just the service on the debt. We're not going to end that problem overnight, but we've got to recognize that we've got to stop. We've got to stop. We're sending $113 billion to the Ukraine. The entire budget of CDC is $12 billion. The budget of EPA is $12 billion. Well, 57% of Americans could not put their hands on $1,000 if they have an emergency in their family. 25% of Americans are hungry. Oh, I have a friend who is on food stamps. He's a commercial fisherman. He's worked his entire life worked to the bone, created a business, gave it to his son-in-law, and he was injured. He's on permanent disability. He was getting food stamps $283 a month, and those food stamps are now worth a lot less because the inflation from paying for the wars caused 76% rise in dairy, milk, and eggs over the past 2 years. On March 1st, he got a robocall from the government saying that his food stamps are being cut by 90%. So he was getting $283 a month, which you can't feed yourself on $9 a day. He's now.
God, you really have to trim your dietary budget to get $9 to work. You can't live a healthy life. That's for true.
Getting $23 a month, trying to feed himself on 80 cents a day. That same month, 30 million Americans got that call that month in March. Another 15 million had their Medicare cut. That same month, we printed $300 billion to bail out the Silicon Valley Bank, and we topped off Ukraine at $113 billion. We have money, plenty of money for the big shots who need their bank bailouts, and for any war that comes along.
Yeah.
But if you took that $113 billion that we've given to the Ukraine and spent it here, we wouldn't have to cut $1 from food stamps for that 30 million Americans. And we're acting like an alcoholic who's behind on his mortgage, and he's taking the milk money and buying rounds for strangers at the bar and thinking he's making permanent friends. And all of these money that we're spending on the military is not making us safer, and it's not making us friends abroad. We spent $8 trillion on these wars in Iraq during that same, and Yemen and Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Libya and Syria. And that same period, bombing bridges, ports, airports, hospitals, universities. That same period, the Chinese spent $8 trillion building ports and schools and hospitals and roads. And they are now eating our lunch abroad because people love them in Africa, Latin America, and Asia because they like them a lot more than sending weapons and holding a gun at their head. We need to change that.
And we have a question on China later on the show. We have a lot of questions that we need to get to. We're going to take.
Yo, man, that was way more information than she was prepared to contend with right there, because he gave a very, very, very good answer right there. Okay, cool. If you're handing out money, his apt analogy of buying rounds for, everybody else at the bar, okay, like that's incredibly good. There's at least an argument that could be made if all of that defense spending was going specifically, to any of the wars being directly fought by the United States. But those going on right now, at least that the public is aware of, they are few and far between. There's just that proxy war that everybody can kind of, notice over there in Ukraine. But, they got all the EU funding, they got all the NATO funding as well. So it's like, well, you got problems at home. Why don't you fucking figure that stuff out? But I'm sure that's Pete Butt gigs. That's his decisions to make, right?
Take a break, though, because coming up next, immigration and the U.S. border was the most frequently asked question we got from our audience. We'll have Mr. Kennedy's answers to that.
Yo, that's interesting. The Democrats will be concerned about the southern border. They said immigration and totality. So, okay.
Much more after a quick break. Border security.
There we go.
Mr. Kennedy, you were recently at the border. You toured it to get a first-hand look. You called it a dystopian nightmare and said that you would seal the border. And I want to go now to our first question from the audience, Josue from Chicago.
Hello, I'm the son of Mexican immigrants and the husband of a Honduran immigrant, and so my question is on immigration. With Congress unable to reach an agreement on comprehensive immigration reform in decades, what is your plan to address immigration?
Yeah, I think, and thank you, Josue. Is it Josue? Okay, I don't think that it's going to be possible to get an immigration reform package through Congress until we seal the border. Because we've got now in the last 3 years, 7 million people have come across the border illegally. And the most disturbing part of me is I witnessed the humanitarian crisis, the cruelty to these people who are being brought to the border. They're being exploited, they're being extorted, they're being raped, they're being robbed. The cartels are now running U.S. immigration policy, and everybody knows that. There have been 9, we were told by Border Patrol, there have been 9 suicides of Border Patrolmen in the last year because they're so demoralized about what's happening. They are literally, it took me 3 days at the border to understand what's happening. The first night I watched, I got there at 2 o'clock in the morning, stayed there until about 4, and I watched just hundreds and hundreds of people coming across. The first group was about 60 African men from West Africa, mainly from Cameroon. I thought I was going to see Central Americans and, Guatemalans and Salvadorians, but I didn't. We only saw, in the whole night, there was only 2 families from Latin America, one from Colombia and one from Peru, and all of them had been brutalized and every penny taken away from them. The rest of them were from Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tibet, Nepal, Pakistan, and many, many from China. The cartels are now advertising all over the world that there's an open.
Yeah. Also, Myron F&F, he relays those types of stories, because that was the type of stuff that he was doing when he was working on the southwest border. And yeah, also, confirming the fact that there were a lot of Asians. They would call them, I forgot the specific term that he used, but yeah, their prices would be a whole hell of a lot higher to get from China and then go through the southern border. Exotics? I think it was exotics was the term that Homeland Security was using on that one. But yeah, no, that's definitely confirmed. Okay, everybody throughout the world who ends up getting trafficked through the southern border, yeah, no, that's the way that they come in. Like, okay, they get smuggled that way, and those are just the ones that they catch. Holy
border, and they're bringing people in. They give them videos about exactly what to do. They fly to Mexico. They're given visas there, internal visas in Mexico. They go from Mexico City on a plane to Mexicali. They're loaded on fleets of buses and then brought to the border. They cross. The only role of the Border Patrol is to stamp them in and check if they have a criminal record. If they don't, they are brought to the airport and they're given a ticket to any city in the United States that they want to go to.
Well, they have to demonstrate need and apply for asylum.
They're given a court date. And the court date is a cursory court date. It's like an arraignment. And then their real court date, which they're not going to show up to, is 7 years later.
Yeah.
So they're essentially given
Yeah, that was one of the issues. It's funny because I just recorded a video earlier today where I ended up pulling up a clip from the presidential debates, and that was one of the things that Trump made note of at the same time. It's like, listen, they come across the border, folks. All they get is just an appearance ticket. They get an appearance ticket, and then they just have to come back on goodwill. And these are the people that are breaking the law in order to come across our great southern border. And do you think they're going to come back up? Of course not, Joe. Of course they're not going to come back, okay? So that's the exact same policy that RFK is just talking about right there. Yeah, okay, here it's like, oh, you, Mr. Lawbreaker, here's your free phone, here's your free, lodging. We'll just send you to, somewhere in the Midwest or some shit like that. But you make sure that you turn up, okay? Please write it down in your planner, or here, I'll just teach you how to program it into your phone. Just come back, please. Hopefully, no. Oh, okay, cool. Well, at your next leisure. Don't worry about it.
A 7-year pass to stay in this country.
How would you seal the border?
Well, you know what? It's not that hard. Because
How would you do it?
I would do it. I mean, there's a number of things that you have to do. I was against Trump's wall, but having seen it down there, I see that you were required to give a physical barrier during certain, not all the way 2,200 miles from San Diego to Brownsville, Texas, but certain highly densely populated areas, you need a physical barrier. But in the hinterlands, in the wilderness areas.
Yo, wait. We had a Democrat right there who was against Trump's border wall until they went down there and seen that. And then it's like, no, the wall totally makes sense. Oh, wow. Huh. Imagine that. So if you're actually being honest and you go down there and you just intrinsically disagree with somebody who's a Democrat, or I'm sorry, somebody who's a Republican, and then you go see the policies in action, realize that, maybe the orange man who went down there and he talked with the people that, said that, yeah, we don't necessarily need like a full concrete barrier the entire way across, just over here, and here. Yeah, that'd be great. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. It all starts to make sense. See, that's why RFK does have that appeal, because he listens to people. It's a big fucking shock, right?
You can use sensors like they do in Israel, the ground sensors and
There's all sorts of AI breakthroughs too. But you would resume the building of Trump's border wall?
Well, a lot of it now has been rebuilt.
Wait a minute. I thought Caitlin Collins on CNN during the Trump town hall said that, you only built a little bit of the wall. But then there's the guy who went down to the wall and said, yeah, much of it's been refurbished.
Orcas, who's the DHS secretary, recognized that the gaps in that wall, that we shouldn't have left them. But it's not so much the wall, it's the other censoring devices that were all ripped up, which I'm very embarrassed to say by this administration, by the Democratic administration. Mm-hmm. And also the policies were changed so that the presumption is everybody gets in. And I witnessed it myself. And we can't have that.
Everybody's not getting in.
Yes, everybody gets in.
There are crowds of people waiting to try and apply through the new app that the Biden administration has set up. They're setting up.
Oh, wow, they got a new app. Fantastic stuff. If I myself legally want to move down to the United States, I've got to jump through hoops. I've got to get through all the rigmarole. Thankfully, okay, an exclusive to the people turning out on this one, I do kind of, within like the next 5 to 10 years, probably do have a pretty good line into the States. Unfortunately, it's to one of the worst places possible, but at least I can move out from there. But something close-ish. So, yeah, and even still, knowing all that stuff to legally come across the border, it's like, basically got to, hey, man, fill out an entire fucking medical record and all that shit in order to do it legally. Meanwhile, hey, man, you go through the southern border, then all of a sudden all you do is just give a ticket, and it's like, well, we'll catch you in a few years.
As for legal immigration.
Oh, you're talking about illegal immigration.
I'm talking illegal immigration. Everybody gets in. I watched it. 7 million people have come in. Just the one little section I was at in Yuma, there's 350,000 people came here before. But I met with the Yuma authorities. I met with the hospitals. I met with the centers that take care of the immigrants who are beleaguered. I met with the Border Patrol and the sheriff, and everybody agreed it could be stopped. It could be wound down to what it was before this administration, which was about 25 people a day, which is not a big problem. But now it's 300 to 800 a day. And that, no nation can survive if they can't protect their borders. I would, as president, I will expand legal immigration. I will make it easier, particularly for workers to come across on the H visas and then, and bring in and have an orderly system that benefits our country. Immigration is good for our country. This kind of immigration is unfair to everybody, and particularly the immigrants who have been brought here. And then over the long term,
No, exactly, and this is another thing that I really liked, and it also exposed Ben Shapiro as being a mental midget, both physically and mentally. But he had former Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper on his little goofy-ass Sunday show, and I watched it, and oh my God, Stephen Harper, miss him so much around here. God, he was so good for the country. But hey, man, all of the women looked at Justin Trudeau back in 2015 and went, "Oh my God, he's so dreamy." Ugh. But no, Yeah, because he laid out, and it's like, I'm not against immigration at all, just talented, skilled immigration, which is totally great. But now Trudeau's just offloading a whole bunch of fucking brown people from the middle of nowhere because, we just, no human beings illegal. Thankfully, Canada's a fairly large country, so won't quite be feeling the pinch anytime soon. But at the rates that he's trying to import people, the numbers currently escape me. I think it's like 40,000 per. I don't think it's per month, but it's a fairly steep fare. It's either 40,000 a month or 400,000 a year, but it's not good. It's really not good in the long term because you can see the effects that are going on right now in France, in fact.
The immigrants that have poured in from Latin America, a lot of them are coming up because of policies, wrongful policies that the U.S. has had, the drug wars, the austerity programs, the support of juntas, the war on the poor that we've maintained for so many years, and we need to change those policies as well.
You mentioned the drug wars, and fentanyl has been a scourge in cities and towns across America. 107,000 Americans died last year of drug overdoses. The vast majority of those people died from fentanyl overdoses. That leads us to our next question. Felicia is an addiction counselor. She lost her son 10 years ago to addiction. Felicia, hi, what's your question tonight?
We are losing the war on drugs. What policies or ideas do you have that would change that? What's your platform on substance use and overdose? We need help desperately.
Yeah, and I have my own history of addiction. So I was an addict for 14 years, between starting one after my dad died till I was 28 years old, and I'm very active in recovery. I go to probably 9 meetings a week, and I spend a lot of my time thinking about it and seeing what works. And I take many people. Over my 40 years working these programs, I've taken hundreds and hundreds of people into different forms of recovery. And I have a very good idea of what works and a vision for what we need to do in this country. And we need to make addiction treatment easy, simple, cheap.
Yeah.
A lot of the industry has evolved because of a variety of factors into almost a predatory industry, a lot of the addiction treatment industry. And I've seen how it works in other countries. I've seen this beautiful model that they have in Italy called San Patrignano, where there are 2,000 kids who work on a large farm in a healing center, and they grow.
It's a beautiful model.
It's good, and that's what we need to build here. And what I would do, as president, is I would decriminalize marijuana. I will make safe banking laws for people who are selling it, but I will tax it federally, and I will use that money to build these healing centers in rural areas, depressed rural areas all over the country, where kids can grow organic food and eat good, eat well, heal themselves spiritually, physically, and emotionally.
I was with you all the way until the decriminalization of pot. I think I put that stance out there multiple different times, but why would you create that gateway? Like, I know it sounds like an old antiquated argument, and I'm sure some the libertarians that are out there are probably cringing at that, but nothing good comes out of it. Man, like, why do you think the opioid crisis coincided with, a bunch of states decriminalizing pot and then Canada in general getting rid of, decriminalized weed implemented decriminalized pot, what was that? Either July, it was Canada Day 15 or 16 or something like that. Now basically you have Vancouver, which is the worst of Seattle and Portland, bundled together, and that place has just fallen into complete squalor. Thankfully, Canada in general isn't as big as the United States. I know, right? Shocker. So we only have one specific example, but it's pretty fucking bad if you take a look at the specifics. So you had me in the first half, but you lost me in the second there, Rob.
And not only for fentanyl, but also for the many kids who are now stuck on SSRIs and are suffering other forms of depression.
Now you got
we
me
need
back.
to start healing our country. Our country, has a form of kind of chronic inflammation, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. We need to start healing ourselves.
All right.
And we need to be compassionate, but we need to be practical about it. And we need to make that a priority. We need to recover our children. We are all, one of my best friends lost a daughter 3 days ago. I lost a niece to a fentanyl overdose during the pandemic. So, I know what it's like. I lost 2 of my brothers. I know what the suffering that American families are enduring, and it is a high priority to me. And it's something that, for me, this is going to be my Peace Corps program. And my uncle had the Peace Corps. I'm going to build these rehab centers all over the country, these farms, healing camps where people can go, where our American children can go and find themselves again and come back and become contributing members to our society and stop the mayhem and the carnage.
So is it going to be something like long-term recovery being there? And
well, San Patrignano is actually...
Is it going to be federally financed? Yeah, who's paying for...
Well, he already laid that out. She was just paying attention, and it's like, yes, my son. He's already dead. Okay, you got to go ahead and you got to move on from that. I know it sounds callous and shit, but if you're actually looking for solutions instead of airtime, fucking listen up, lady.
I said, I'm going to decriminalize marijuana on a federal basis, allow the states to regulate it. continue to tax it federally and use those taxes to fund the recovery programs. And I would do the same thing for psychedelic drugs, which I do not think should be criminalized. You know,
You would legalize psychedelic drugs?
I would legalize psychedelic drugs, some form of legalization. But they should, there's so much. I know personally, and I know, I've read the studies, and there's so many people being helped in different ways by them. We have to make it easier, maybe to prescribe them, to give them through therapeutically. I don't know about just buying them in stores. I have to look at all that. But in one way or another, we need to make it easy for people to use them in ways that could benefit our children, that could benefit everybody. So I've seen it in my own family, the benefits of it. And I've been in recovery for 40 years. I'm a person who would never tell you that the answer is a drug, right? I'm a person who says, you never can fix what's wrong inside of you with something outside of you, with a substance, a powder, a potion, or a pill. It doesn't work. But I have seen against everything against all of my, training and indoctrination in that area, I've seen miraculous recoveries from psychedelic drugs, from PTSD, from veterans who have used it, from people who have suffered severe depression, OCD, many other injuries. And I'm not saying blanket legalization, but we need to make it easy for psychiatrists and therapists who are trained to be able to use this on their patients, and see if we experiment and see if we get good results.
We know that nearly 90% of people in this country who need help with substance use disorder don't get it, largely because they can't afford it, or they can't find it, or they're too afraid to ask for it. There's enormous stigma, which is a huge issue about people seeking help and getting help and finding help. In recent months, we've heard a lot of discussion about the son of the man you're running against, Hunter Biden. And I'm not asking about the questions about anything he might have done that was illegal, any crimes he may have committed, but I'm talking more about the way his addiction has been handled in the public dialogue. The fact that he's almost always labeled as, and I'm going to do it myself by asking this question, a crackhead. As a person in long-term recovery, as a member of a storied political family, I'm curious, and somebody who feels passionately about recovery and chipping away, I'm assuming, at the stigma surrounding substance use disorder and addiction, what do you make of the way his addiction has been bandied about?
Well, I'm not going to compound whatever problems that is by sitting in judgment of. I mean, people have addiction problems. I've never met Hunter Biden. I'm not going to put a judgment on him. I don't know anything about him other than the stuff I've read in the press. Addiction is a tragedy.
Seen on the laptop. Yeah, of course.
And it's cunning. It's incomprehensible. It's baffling, and it's really difficult to deal with. And I wish him and his family the best. God bless him, and I hope that he finds a road to recovery. That's all.
But do you wish that perhaps that wasn't becoming, in some quarters, what's perceived as a political weapon? If, you can call for investigations until the cows come home, but to continually label and remind everybody that he was once addicted to drugs is like having that dragged out over and over again.
Well, I'm for de-escalating all of the poison and the hatred and the vitriol. So, whoever it is, whether it's against, President Trump or President Biden, you won't hear me saying like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like Hunter Biden's laptop, all the flashy stuff is obviously like the hookers and the crack and speeding down the road at 172 miles an hour, which looks like just absolute. You probably shouldn't say this, but fun as fuck. I love to speed and drive fast, okay? That may be one of my vices, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, yeah, all of that shit gets the headlines because it's funny and sensationalist. Okay, what else is in there as well? 10% for the big guy detailing the different business meetings between China and the Biden family, Ukraine and the Biden family, Iraq, setting up a bunch of housing programs for James Biden. Okay, like that's the more substantive stuff. So if we want to take a look at that, that's great. The Hunter stuff, it's like, okay, yeah, he's the son, but if he's doing some fuck shit by setting up some very important business dealings between him and his father in order to get access in a quid pro quo type situation, well, that's worthy of investigation. Just it's a little crack rock on top of the corruption cake, if you will.
Bad things about President Biden. I like President Biden. I've known him for probably 40 years, and this campaign is not, is not about criticizing him. And I tried not to do that. If there's a policy I disagree with, like the war, like censorship, like the lockdowns, I'm going to criticize those. But I'm not going to attack him as a man, and I'm not going to attack President Trump because we've had enough of that. We need to figure out a way to start talking to each other and to start healing each other and stop, just hating on each other. This polarization is more dangerous. It's been in this country since the Civil War, and we need to figure out, ways to start talking to Americans with whom we disagree.
All right. Well, there are many Democrats who disagree with you on the subject of vaccines. So coming up, we're going to take some questions from our audience about childhood vaccines and your positions.
All right. Here's where it gets spicy, and because this has been up on YouTube for like 4 or 5 days, I think we should be fine. But this is what everybody knows RFK for. So here we go.
Robert F.
zip ahead.
Kennedy Jr.
There we go.
and Mr. Kennedy, one of the biggest controversies surrounding your candidacy is your stance on childhood vaccines. Nearly every scientific and medical organization, including the CDC, the FDA, the AMA, the American Academy of Pediatrics, all say you're wrong on this issue. This leads us to our very
Oh, see, my appeal to authority. See, sir, because you just have the science on your side. We have the science. So clearly, you're a kook.
first question from our audience. It's Dr. Tariq Butt, who specializes
I would ask you one thing on what issue?
on childhood vaccines
What about them?
and whether they ever cause autism or damage kids. They all say these vaccines have saved
They
millions of
never
lives.
damage kids.
I don't think anybody has said they never have. There might be a child here, but overall, all those organizations say vaccines are safe and have saved millions and millions of lives.
Shut up, they're safe and effective. Just ask Jamie Foxx. Oh, wait, nobody knows where he's at.
But let's get to our audience question from Dr. Butts.
Good evening. Eradication of chickenpox and polio from the US and many parts of the world is a direct result of regular vaccines. Measles, mumps, rubella, and many diseases are preventable, and there's little to no evidence of these diseases in vaccinated population.
Here's
Your
my
vaccine
friend.
stance is dangerous to the health and well-being of millions. Medical experts are deeply concerned about your message. How can we help you to come to the side of science?
You can just see the look on his face. Like, I'll just roll that back for a quick second, but he's just like, yeah, okay, I've dealt with this question before. You could just see he's like, I need to be nice to this guy, but then at the same time, he's got his pre-rehearsed script right there, and this is going to be fun.
Medical experts are deeply concerned about your message.
Yes,
How
of
can we
course.
help you to come to the side of science?
What was the question? How can you help me come to my senses?
No.
No.
Side of science?
You are a very smart person.
Okay, so I think most people don't know what my stance is on vaccines. I've never been anti-vaccine, and I've said that hundreds and hundreds of times, but it doesn't matter because that is a way of silencing me. Using that pejorative to describe me is a way of silencing or marginalizing me. My position on vaccines, I think, virtually every American would agree with my stance on vaccines, which is that vaccines should be tested like other medicines. They should be safety tested, and unfortunately, the vaccines are not safety tested. They're not. Of the 72 vaccine doses now essentially mandated, they're recommended, but they're really mandated for American children. None of them, not one, has ever been subject to a pre-licensing placebo-controlled trial.
Yes, they have.
No.
Yes, they have.
Okay, let me just say something. Dr. Fauci and many other people for many years said this.
Do you think she actually knows that, or was somebody listening along and just told her in her earpiece? Or was that just her programming right there, just saying, okay, the moment he says anything controversial or he starts to include some scientific evidence behind that stuff, just immediately start to chime in? I'm thinking that's probably somewhere in there, I'd imagine.
Bobby Kennedy, when he says that, is wrong. So I met with Dr. Fauci in 2016, and I agreed to go on Trump's Vaccine Safety Commission, and I was with Aaron Siri and Lynn Redwood and a number of other people, and we said to him, can you show us one test from any vaccine, pre-licensing safety test? And he said, I'll send it to you. I can't find one now. He never did. So we sued him. We sued Aaron Siri and I sued HHS.
Oh, yeah.
And after a year of litigation and stonewalling, they said,
I think Robert Barnes was on that lawsuit. He helped draft it in some form or fashion, and he was definitely attached to something involving RFK suing the federal government.
that they could not provide a single safety study for any vaccine that is on the childhood schedule, pre-licensing safety study. So anybody who wants to read that can go to to the Children's Health Defense website, and you can read HHS's admission that not a single one has ever been safety tested pre-licensing. Now, what I've said is other medicines are required to do that, and we should have to do that for vaccines. If I'm wrong, show me the test, show me the study. You won't be able to, because there are none. That means that we don't know what the long-term risks are, the risk profile of those products. And I'll give you mentioned chickenpox. So when CDC was thinking of recommending this chickenpox vaccine as mandating for children,
Okay. Interested. I know I just cut him off mid-sentence, but I was thinking about it. It's like, okay, when I was growing up, the way that I was inoculated from chickenpox was through exposure. Like growing up very early. I can't even remember, but I know my parents, they make mention of it whenever. Yeah, my sister and I, at the same time, we got infected with chickenpox alongside, I think it was cousins or whatever the familial affiliation was. But yeah, we just all got it at the same time and worked it out of your system so that, hopefully you don't end up with, what does it metastasize as an adult? Is it shingles or measles? No, it's not measles. So I guess it would be shingles. So yeah, should get it out of the way back in the cut. I was like 4 or 5 or something like that. I don't actually know anybody who's gotten the chickenpox vaccine. At least I don't think so. It's like everybody just got it that way. So,
did a study, and the scientist they hired to do that study was a scientist called Gary Goldman, contract scientist. And he did the study in an isolated place in California called Antelope Valley, a long-term study. And what they find is if you give the chickenpox vaccine, mass vaccinate with chickenpox, it stops chickenpox, but it causes shingles epidemics later on.
Oh,
which are
okay.
20 times as deadly as chickenpox. So if you go, nevertheless,
Interesting.
despite those studies, we mandate it for American children in this country. In Europe, they don't. If you go to the British National Health Service website right now, you can read on that where they say, we do not recommend chickenpox vaccines because it causes shingles epidemics later on. And that's the problem. You can't just look at, you can say that this product is going to prevent this particular disease, but you have to look at the long-term impacts. Vaccines, like other medicines, have injuries that have long diagnostic horizons and long incubation periods, that if you do not do long-term studies on placebo-controlled studies comparing vaccinated populations, unvaccinated populations, you won't do it. Let me just give you one quick other example. The most popular vaccine in the world is the DTP vaccine, diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis.
Okay. Yeah.
We banned it, we got rid of it in this country because it was causing injuries, brain injuries, severe brain injuries, or death to 1 in every 300 children.
We
used it in the 80s,
Okay.
and that's why there was all this litigation against vaccine companies that precipitated the passage of the Vaccine Act that then gave them immunity from liability. But in Europe, they don't use it. In America, they don't use it. But we give it to 161 million African children a year. So Bill Gates asked
shit.
the Danish
I was legitimately just going to pause it and say, shout out Bill Gates, but
government to support that program and said it saved 30 million lives. The Danish government said, show us the data. He wasn't able to. So they went to
probably along the same lines as polio vaccine was out there saving lives in Africa.
Africa and did their own studies. And they looked at 30 years of DTP data. And what they found shocked them all. They found that girls who got the DTP were dying at 10 times the rate of unvaccinated girls. But they were dying of things that nobody had ever associated with the vaccine. They were dying of diphtheria, of anemia, malaria, bilharzia, pulmonary disease, respiratory disease, and pneumonia.
Yo, what the fuck?
And nobody noticed for 30 years that it was the vaccinated girls and not the unvaccinated girls who were dying. And what had happened is these girls were not dying of
Not noticing or told not to notice.
diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. The vaccine had protected them against those, but it had also ruined their immune systems. And they were unable to defend themselves against other just minor diseases that other kids who had hardy immune systems were able to fend off. So that's why you need these long-term studies. And that's why I'm worried that we don't do that here in the United States.
And we do have evidence of that, like there are clinical trials, randomized trials, and there's
no.
a difference between association and causation, right? Somebody can take a medication and get involved in a motor vehicle accident.
Oh my God, that's totally not the same thing. Didn't you just hear what he was talking about right there? Like there was direct correlations. But that's always what you get with these people that just, they want to impose their view onto you instead of just listening in order to come to an understanding. Okay, the immediate thing that he did was, excuse me, Mr. Kennedy, you don't know actually, we do have that information. Okay, where's the information? He just spent, 5 minutes breaking everything down systematically, and you just, no, we have all of the evidence that we need, and I believe in all of this good stuff, and that's fantastic. I've got the evidence on my side. Well, I don't think that he's nefarious in his actions. He's just also being willfully ignorant as well, which is just as bad.
It doesn't mean that, that is associated, but it was not caused by medication unless we get to the bottom of it. So many times we should continue to figure out ways to, for the safety of vaccines, of course, and medical community is always looking for that. But at the same time,
Man down. Clean up on aisle 2.
we can really come to agreement that vaccines are important. They do prevent those diseases. After all, smallpox was in the world, all around the world. It's not there anymore. So there is evidence of that.
And then there's diseases, when we passed the Vaccine Act, when I was a kid, there was only 3 vaccines. And I was compliant. But when we passed the Vaccine Act, it made vaccines very, very valuable. And all of a sudden, there was a gold rush to add a lot of new vaccines to the schedule for diseases that aren't even casually contagious, like rotavirus, like hepatitis B. Why are we giving hepatitis B vaccine to a 1-day-old child? Hepatitis B, the major vectors for that are it's sexually transmitted or by needles. Why would you give that to a 1-day-old child? It's really a profit motive. Now, you're right, that correlation is not causation, but the Institute of Medicine has looked at the vaccine schedule and said in their 2011 report, there are over 150 injuries that are likely to be associated with vaccines that have never been studied. So it's the CDC's responsibility to do those studies, and they've been ordered again and again and again to do them, and they have refused. And that's wrong. We need an agency that is putting public health first and not pharmaceutical profits. You were talking about the opioid crisis. The opioid crisis, started with the oxycodone. Now it's, fentanyl. But the same companies that got the FDA to lie to us about the addictiveness, lie to every doctor in this country about the addictiveness of oxycodone and get a whole generation addicted. Those are the same companies that make these, other products. Mm-hmm. And the pharmaceutical, the 4 companies that make vaccines in this country, Merck, Sanofi, Glaxo, and Pfizer, have paid over $35 billion in criminal penalties over the past decade for lying to doctors, for falsifying science, for defrauding regulators.
And then how much money have they spent on lobbying, not just to the Democratic Party, but to everybody in general? How much money do they spend on advertising to all of the big news networks as well? Oh, yeah. See why they never get held accountable? Because, oh, yeah, if you go ahead and you prosecute those big pharma businesses, all of a sudden all the money dries up fucking everywhere. Well, hey, man, if we were exclusively on Rumble, I was going to talk about a certain state that also runs a similar racket, which, if you know, you know, and if you don't, well, mazel tov to ignorance, I guess.
And we need to keep an eye on them. We can't just trust them. If they say it's a vaccine, we all trust it. We need to have actual science on it. And I think that's all I say. I don't want to get rid of vaccines. If you want to take a vaccine, you should be able to do it. But we need good science, and that's all I've asked for.
There's the correct stance.
What do you?
Yo, this bitch has no fucking idea. She's trying to gather up all this information, but RFK's been on this stump for decades at this point in time. Like, he didn't just come around to this stance with the coof, doing some research into him, also finding out that, yeah, he's been doing this stuff since like the 80s. So you ain't gonna stump him like that on this topic for sure.
Say to people, I mean, it sounds like you're saying that every scientist, every government, governments around the world.
Nobody's saying everybody. I see what you're trying to do here in a trap, but she is totally fucking lost. Look at that pause screen right there. She is looking at that ground, trying to gather up any piece of information she can find.
Doctors like Dr. Butts are all lying about vaccines.
I've never said anything like that.
The AMA, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the FDA says, and in fact, on its website, you can clearly see vaccines they go through 3 stages of FDA testing against double-blind placebos. They already do that testing for vaccines.
Elizabeth, you can say that. I'm telling you.
I'm not saying that. The FDA,
no, the FDA is not saying that.
Yes,
because
they do on their website.
They will not tell you that that there's any vaccine that has ever undergone a long-term placebo-controlled trial prior to licensure. They will not, because it's not true. And you can go to my website and see where HHS says, yeah, there are none.
Well, you're competing websites saying different things.
I'm not saying the AMA is lying or the doctors are lying. What I'm saying is the FDA does lie. And the FDA lied to us about Vioxx. They knew that the Vioxx was causing heart attacks, but they let doctors believe that it was a medicine that was good, beneficial for headaches and arthritis without telling it that they were going to kill them. And they ended up killing between 120,000 and 500,000.
All these doctors and all these scientists around the world who say vaccines are safe and have saved millions and millions of lives.
The same people said Vioxx was safe. The same people said opioids.
Same people were also saying back in the 60s that thalidomide would be a great way to cure any sort of morning sickness pains. Now how many people are walking around with the old fucking flipperoo in their 50s?
That oxycodone was not addictive because FDA said it and they believe them. And that's the problem. We have a corrupt federal agency that's lying to the AMA, to all of those agencies, and all the doctors, and they believe them. But those agencies are controlled by pharma. That is the problem. And that's what I'm trying to end as president.
You know that your own family doesn't support, many members of your own family don't support your position on vaccines. Your brother, your sister, and your niece have all written an editorial saying on vaccines, Bobby is wrong. His work.
See, this is where I see the correlation between him and Trump, because, so many members of your family, including that fucking crazy judge who's out there just trying to shill a recent book, but exact same thing, man. Okay, a lot of your family members, what do you have to say? Fuck water, fuck blood. Hey, man, if they're not down with the actual science, fuck them. Who cares? Hey, man, we've lost a lot of Kennedys before, so, hey, man, it sucks to suck, I guess.
On vaccines is having heartbreaking consequences. What's your response? Your own family thinks you're wrong on this.
Does your family agree with everything that you said?
Definitely not.
There it is.
You got me on that one. But it does tee up our next question from Kellen here in Chicago. Hi, Kellen.
Hello, sir. Thank you so much for being here. As an undecided Democratic voter, I have a few concerns, and I'd like just to hear your thoughts.
What's your position on force-feeding soy into everybody?
On easing some of those concerns. We just heard about vaccines, that being one of them. Another one being...
mandatory lift schedule. Holy fuck, that guy's built like a straw, just not so heavy.
That you have attributed a connection between 5G data and in quotes that it was designed, or that it will harvest our data and control other people, and then also...
can I answer that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, my concern about 5G is that the RF radiation from 5G is dangerous. It penetrates, it disrupts the blood-brain barrier. It also is associated with glioblastomas and other cancers, and it causes a lot of other dramatic health effects. And
this is where he kind of starts to lose me, but then at the same time, he just rattled off all of those medical stats. But then I was thinking as well, because there's actually well-researched studies in the science on that one, where people who used to chronically talk on their cell phone, that's what I'm pointing to right here, using it to chat back and forth, so it's just right there anyway. So, that makes sense if I'm just pointing down there. You can't see it on camera, but just take my word for it. But, the people who were talking on the phone would develop ear cancer and shit like that just because of their chronic use of their cell phone. And it makes sense, sort of. It's just, I'd like to see the studies. I don't think that he's lying, and I don't think that he's misinformed. I would just like to see the information that he has, because it's interesting, right? Like, it's definitely different than the people that used to think that the 5G would activate the graphite and the shots. It's like, you motherfuckers are crazy.
There are literally thousands and thousands of studies in that. I've litigated on that issue, and I've won in the Federal Court of Appeals. So, you know, you can say it's conspiracy theory, but the Federal Court of Appeals, you know, I also won a case on Monsanto and glyphosate that it called non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that was called a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
What I've said about 5G is, yeah, it is dangerous. It is underregulated. Other countries regulate it much better than us, and we need to protect our children. We should not be having these antennas on elementary schools. We should be warning people appropriately. Do not put that cell phone next to your head. Because, you know, we're seeing this epidemic now of glioblastomas, and almost all of them are connected to the year that you favor the cell phone with. Oh, you know, there's study after study that shows that, and I'm in litigation on that issue right now. And, you know, if we get a fair trial, we're going to win that litigation as well.
Yeah, I just don't know anything about 5G or anything like that. But yeah, no, dude, I think we've probably all heard those stories at some point in time. So it's interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah, you're a lawyer and an activist. You're not a doctor or a scientist.
Listen.
Yo, what the fuck? You're trying to appeal to people that are, you know, quote unquote doctors, with Fauci out there who hasn't seen a patient since the fucking 70s. And oh yeah, you're a lawyer and an activist. What do you know about this stuff? Why? He has the ability to read, and he's obviously done his research on this shit. What would you rather have? You know, somebody who's just got a piece of paper on the wall and hasn't actually done anything in their chosen vocation for decades, or somebody who is completely immersed in all of the data, discussing the topics, even though they haven't spent all of the money in order to get the accreditation? I would take the guy immersed in the shit, who knows that stuff inside and out, as opposed to some figurehead that just sits in an office all day. But then that's just me.
We live in a democracy. We don't have a priesthood here.
Rob, live in a constitutional republic, at least in the United States. You guys do. I live in soft communism.
We don't have high priests who are telling us we're in charge of our own lives, and Americans need to do their own research. Yep. And, you know, listen, people say trust the experts. That became a mantra during COVID.
Oh.
I brought over 500 cases, and almost all of them involved a scientific controversy. My job is to read science, to learn it, and to be able to read it critically. And every case I've ever brought, there's an expert on that side and an expert on this side. When we brought the Monsanto case, there were 3 experts from Harvard, Stanford, and Yale. And we had 3 experts from Harvard, Stanford, and Yale, and they were saying exactly the opposite thing. Oh, you know, saying trust the experts to me makes no sense at all. Trusting the experts is a function of religion and totalitarianism. It is not a function of democracy. In democracy, we question everybody.
We have a lot of questions I want to get to, but before we do, I want to direct our viewers to our website to go deeper on the science of vaccines, as well as Mr. Kennedy's positions on everything from immigration to foreign policy. We have resources available for you online, and encourage you to check them out at newsnationnow.com. All right, a big issue.
Go to Children's Health Defense, and you can find the other side of the story. You can find the non-government science that often is paid for by the government, but then they deny and disavow afterwards. But you can read a lot more studies.
We have a lot more questions. A big issue here in Chicago and around the country is gun violence, and we have a question for you now from Nick here in Chicago.
So on May 30th of 2020, I lost one of my best friends, Chris Beatty, to gun violence.
Well, I got questions, but we'll let you answer, or let you ask them.
And also being a founder and CEO of a tech company that keeps people safe during marketplace transactions, I want to know, like, how are you going to use the federal resources to slow and or end the epidemic of gun violence in America?
Yeah, thank you for that question. For me, it's a very tough question. And I lost my father to gun violence. I lost my uncle to gun violence, and many friends. And so I'm aware and sensitive to the injury that can cause to generational injury that occurs from guns. You know, we have a gun problem in this country. We have a Supreme Court now that has given a very expansive view of the Second Amendment.
Yay.
And I believe in the Constitution, including the Second Amendment. And practically, you know, I do not believe that there is within that Second Amendment that there's anything that we can meaningfully do to reduce the trade and the ownership of guns. And I'm not going to take people's guns away. And because telling the people that I'm going to take their guns away is not practical. It's not anybody who tells you that they're going to be able to reduce gun violence through gun control at this point, I don't think is being realistic. And I think we have to figure out other ways to do that. I think we have to figure out other ways to reduce that violence. And we need to, and ultimately.
Yeah, if he takes that holistic approach that he had when it came to addiction that we talked about earlier in the town hall right there, and he applies that to gun violence by making sure that, you know, people are properly armed and trained in firearms, the people that can legally and responsibly own them, then yeah, no, that's definitely how you start to curb a whole bunch of gun violence. Because, okay, if that guy's from Chicago, he knows what side of town is the one that you don't go to after the sun goes down for very obvious reasons, not because there's a whole bunch of law-abiding citizens out there just emptying their mags. It's, you know, the people that shouldn't be having those guns, not because they aren't American citizens. It's because, well, they're kind of up to no good.
Ultimately, my hope is that we can bring Americans together, get them to trust each other, get them to trust their government again, and then we can work out, you know, every American, whether they're Republican gun carrier or a Democrat who is, you know, who believes that nobody should own guns. We all want the same thing, which is we want to keep our children safe and we want to keep our neighborhoods safe.
Yeah.
And there are, I think we have to look at what the alternatives are for doing that. And, you know, what some of the things I've talked about are that we need to look at some of the other causes of the violence. One is the division among Americans and the hatred. We need to reduce that.
Say it.
The distrust of government. We need to reduce that.
Say it.
We also need to look at the contribution, you know, particularly with the school shootings of some of these psychiatric drugs. And, you know, I'm not saying they're causing it, but I'm saying there is evidence they are. And that evidence, well, part of the evidence includes the fact that for
very strong correlation. How many school shootings were there prior to Columbine? Or at least, you know, hey man, ones that are known like that. And both of those kids, they were on how many different antidepressants, SSRIs? Oh, just asking questions. And subsequently, recently, with all of the other, hopefully that string of violence is kind of ended here. Well, obviously it's summertime, so ain't no school shootings that are going to be happening. Even though you'd think that the worst performers would be in summer school. I digress, but every single one of those more recent shooters that were running through the halls of the places, weren't they all on a whole host of drugs? Weren't there like a handful of trans shooters there for a second, on a whole bunch of estrogen, on a whole bunch of different hormone blockers or hormones specifically? It really does get the old noggin jogging there, doesn't it?
SSRIs, almost all of them have on their manufacturer's inserts among the listed side effects are homicidal and suicidal behavior.
That doesn't mean antidepressants caused any of these people to commit mass shootings in school.
Of course it doesn't.
Okay.
We ought to be looking
correlation.
at it, shouldn't we be looking at video games and cell phones and some of the social, you know, some of the social.
Yo, I don't know if you guys have heard, but the France riots in general, it's not just Paris anymore, but that's what Macron, the president of France, is unironically blaming all of the violence on. No, it has nothing to do with, you know, racial divides or, you know, just mass uneducated, unskilled immigration that has come through, and now that there's leading to race riots in the streets. No. It's violent video games.
Social media stuff. We should be looking at all these things, including the SSRIs. And by the way, there are studies out there that indicate a higher percentage of the people who committed these school violence were on SSRIs.
Yeah, but there are also like tens and tens of millions of Americans on antidepressants who don't commit mass shootings.
Well, of course. And they're
Well, what are your suicide rates?
people who smoke cigarettes and don't get cancer. So but shouldn't we be looking?
Yeah, stop pointing out the exception, bitch. Like, come on.
We be looking at those things. I mean, it's clear something happened in this country. Something happened that we can't really explain and that we need to explain. And NIH really ought to be explaining it to us, but it doesn't do these studies. It will not do the studies where there may be a big shot as the culprit. Why, you know, when I was a kid, many of the schools that you know, my friends attended had gun clubs in them. And the kids brought their rifles to school every day. And nobody was.
Man, that sounded so cool back in the cut, or people, or kids that, you know, used to live in the country. I think my father used to do this as well, but yeah, you just bring your rifle to school and then, you know, you'd go hunting after class, and it's like there was no big deal. You just keep it in your locker. That was about it. And you hear stories about that happening all the time. It was either I'm sure my dad probably did something like that, but then also guys that would work with when I was out in the oil patch for a hot second. But yeah, no, they would just tell those stories too. Like they'd bring 22 to class and then they just go out into the woods afterwards, and, you know, they just catch a rabbit or something small like that, skin it, cook it by the fire out down by the river, and, you know, just have a fucking blast. So yeah, it sounds weird in today's day and age, but hey man, check out everything else that they're doing to the kids, and doesn't that sound just a little bit more weird?
Shooting children. No, in all of human history, in all of the nations in the world, there's never been a time when people randomly went into a group of children and started shooting them. Why did this suddenly start? Why is it not happening in Switzerland, which has, a comparable number of guns per capita that we have?
No, we have far more guns.
We have
per
far
capita.
more, but they have a lot of guns, and their last school shooting was 21 years ago. We're having them every 21 hours.
We have a few more questions we want to get to, but very quickly, in 10
Do you
seconds.
believe that we shouldn't even look at that issue?
I want to ask you about the fact that you're running for the Democratic nomination, and 77% of Democrats support an assault weapons ban. Do you not support an assault weapons ban?
If we can get a consensus on it, if Republicans and Democrats agreed to it and it passed Congress, I would sign it.
Okay. We are going to take a quick break. The LGBTQ movement has a question on where Democrats stand and where Mr. Kennedy stands. We'll have that question for him and more in just a moment.
I think this is the last question.
James from Charleston. He's a CEO of a social media consulting firm who has a question about the LGBTQ.
Yo, that looks like Michael Moore, but oof. They probably are both panel van enthusiasts.
You vote.
Oh, you were going to ask a gate question. What about those two chaps in the polo shirts in the back? Okay.
James.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Mr. Kennedy, I have a question. You recently agreed and then withdrew that agreement to speak before a group named Moms for Liberty. They are a right-wing group that would like to tell other parents how to do their own children, but you agreed to do that. You have mentioned your uncle and your father, but you've not mentioned Ted Kennedy, who I worked with the United States Senate for 6 years, and his staff on these issues.
Did you guys discuss parking arrangements of certain Oldsmobiles?
There was no bigger champion or stalwart for LGBTQ equality than Ted Kennedy, the late Ted Kennedy, and you know that. Explain to me.
Oh, you know that. Wow, this guy knows a lot of things, huh? Seems a little hostile speaking through a television screen. Fucking bearded bitch.
Me why, as a Democratic voter, I should ever support you in a primary against any other Democrat when you agreed to speak before a group.
Oh, by the way, who's the first president to go into the Oval Office being a supporter of same-sex marriage? No, like I'm trying to, flaunt that was, a great thing of anybody specifically. I'm just saying it's like, oh, why should I support you because you want to talk to, I don't know, the other side? It's like, you're not pure. Unclean. Unclean. Oh, fucking weirdo.
That wants to ban my marriage and tell other parents how to treat their children.
I didn't speak in front of that group. Yeah. And when somebody on my staff accepted that invitation, I was unaware of it.
I need to interrupt you for 1 second. As a former congressional staffer, if somebody who's elected blames staff, that's the wrong answer. You have to take responsibility for agreeing to speak before those groups.
Fun guy.
I'm at the beginning of a campaign. I have no, long-term staff. We weren't allowed to even raise money until April 5th. So I'm scaling a campaign very, very quickly, and I accept a lot of invitations without the capacity to look into. And I know Teddy had, 86 members on his staff. But when, a member of my staff, through no fault of her own, who's accepted that, and when I found out that was their position, I declined to go. Oh, there's nobody. There will be nobody in the Oval Office who is more supportive of LGBTQ rights than I am. I was with Teddy campaigning at the Castro in 1980. That was the first presidential campaign that ever recorded the gay vote. It's very important to me. It's a civil rights, as important as the civil rights to any other group, and their civil rights my family has stood for, has fought for, and I will do the same. I made a mistake by accepting that invitation, and when I found out those positions, I did not show up.
Thank you, James.
Would you denounce what they stand for? That's my question.
Would you denounce what they stand for? Moms for Liberty is James's question.
I'm not going to issue a denunciation. I'm telling you right now, I don't agree with anybody who says that we shouldn't respect gay rights, or anybody else's rights.
I've heard of the group before, but they're just more or less concerned with, I don't know, let's keep sex out of the classroom. I don't know so much about, they just want to go ahead and, walk back same-sex marriage, even though that's kind of fucking based, but I don't even know if that's their opinion at all whatsoever. So this guy who seems to know a lot of things without providing any receipts, I worked with your uncle. Well, he's my uncle, you fucking moron, so I think I probably know him a little bit better than you, just saying.
If you're an American, you have those rights, and everybody should respect them. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that those are protected, and I always have my whole life.
James. All right, thank you so much for that question.
He got nothing.
Another one from Hella, who's a retired patient care representative for a pharmaceutical company.
Go back and
she is in Manchester, New Hampshire. Helen.
Hi, thank you for being here.
Why does she look like every Helen ever? Just saying.
As president, what strategy would you employ to address China's recent ongoing negotiations with Havana about setting up a joint military training facility in Cuba?
What I will do as president is to de-escalate tensions with China. I understand. When the Russians went to Cuba, they went into with their missile systems. They went there because we put missile systems in Turkey and Italy, as I said before.
Yep.
We now are putting bases and ships in the South China Sea. We really and we're escalating tensions every day with the Chinese. There are people, the neocons in the White House, who want a war with China. And I believe that China wants to dominate the globe but I don't believe that they want a war with the United States. We spend 10 times, we spend more on our military than the next 10 nations combined. We spend 3 times what China spends. We have 800 bases around the world. China has 1.5. Oh, I don't think China wants to compete with us, and it wants to compete on an economic playing field. And I am not frightened of that. I don't think that we can do it as long as we're spending 1.3 trillion on military and national security expenses every year. I don't think we can compete globally, economically. I think we ought to de-escalate, we ought to unravel the empire, and we ought to bring that money home, start investing in our industrial base home, investing in our middle class, investing in business. My grandfather always said, the power of a nation is not in its military, it's in
the influence of the mafia. God damn it.
Its economy. And we need to build a robust economy at home, and then we need to project economic power, not military power abroad. And I think when we start doing that, the Chinese will also de-escalate.
The Chinese, Xi has increased. He's increasingly seen as militaristic by people who are China watchers. And
increasingly seen, but is he though? The Navy is. The rest of their capabilities, don't quite know. But wasn't there that video of them just waving the sticks in the air when India decided to go fuck around and find out? And yeah, China's interesting. Like, who was it that I think that was, because, George, was that you who recommended that Colonel McGregor podcast on PBD, or at least you brought it up? I listened to it, was that Monday or some shit like that? Monday or Sunday or something like that. But yeah, his assessment of the situation, if the United States was to go over there and directly intervene in any sort of a conflict between China and Taiwan, to say is grim would be a little bit of an understatement. But the overall military capacity of China, they could probably defend themselves fairly well, especially given the United States, the close proximity of its allies in comparison to China. It's not exactly an advantageous position. Now, if China was to launch an attack over at the United States or to Canada, it'd be a little bit more tough because, yeah, their Navy, not that great. Okay, they're trying to play catch up, but if you don't curtail them right now, and you know what, hey man, it's a simple game of, try to technologically advance, they might be 50, 60, 70 years behind the technology that's out there. But hey man, as technology advances, that exponential growth factor, it's very real. So from a defensive stance, China's pretty much got it locked down. But on the offense, waits to be seen.
And the military budget in China has increased steadily over the last 10 years. It's dwarfed obviously by the American military budget, but many people feel like he is more militaristic. Do you not agree?
We spend 3 times on our military. Our military budget is 3 times what China's is.
Yeah.
I think China is a poor country next to the United States. They have their average income, their per capita income is about a third of ours. They want to build their middle class. They're not going to do that by getting in a war. They do not want a war with Taiwan. They don't want World War III. They don't want to fight the United States in a war. They do want to compete with us economically, and I welcome that kind of competition. I think it will be good for our country. It will be good for China. It will be good for the world. And let me just tell you something that we should all be thinking about. We're on the verge of a new era with AI, AI technology.
Huge.
And it is the most frightening threat to, Elon Musk a couple of years ago, when I first started taking notice of him, he said that AI is going to first take our jobs, then it's going to kill us. And he wasn't using hyperbole. The AI, it has a capacity to do terrible, terrible things to all of us. The only way that we're going to prevent that is by bringing all the smartest AI people in the world into one place and negotiating treaties. We cannot afford to be at war with Russia or with China or with Iran. We need to be figuring out ways of treaties that make AI development and have standards that are transparent, that are enforceable, that we all agree on, and we're never going to do that when we have military tensions with these nations. We need to be working together right now, and it's existential for us. So, I think it's crazy for us to continue to meet every problem with a military solution. And of course, when you do that, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you make Russia or China a military enemy, it forces them to respond militarily. What we'll do is, as we de-escalate, we'll see whether they follow us, and that's what we need to be doing.
All right, our final question is from Dennis, who is now retired after career.
Yo, man, that was just, facts on facts on facts right there. Just saying that, okay, yeah. China's far behind. Just keep them at bay, keep them far behind, but they're eventually going to catch up, man. Like I've always been saying, at least for the longest time, and I think a lot of people have also echoed those same sentiments. Where if they start to pair up with Russia and with India, that's going to be a big fucking problem. So you know what, hey man, flex them while you got them, I guess.
Career with a Fortune 500 company. He's here in Chicago. Hi, Dennis.
Thank you. I'd first like to compliment you and applaud you for your courage of your beliefs. I really find it very admirable, so thank you. My question is, given the polarized state of political beliefs across the United States, what are 3 things you will do in the first 100 days of your administration to unite this country?
There's a lot of things I'm going to do during the first 3 months, but the major thing that I'm going to do is just be rigorous about telling the truth to the American people about everything and having the agencies tell the truth to the American people, because the division in this country, I believe the real key to the division is that we're being lied to. You know, when I was a kid, everybody trusted the government. Why? Because the government was telling us the truth. And in fact, the first time that we ever caught the government in a lie was in 1960 when the U-2 went down in Russia. The CIA's U-2 went down. And Allen Dulles persuaded Eisenhower to lie about it. And he did, because they didn't know that the Russians, that Gary Francis Power, the pilot, had not used his suicide device, and that the Russians had captured him. So they were holding him, waiting for us to lie, and then they produced him. And when that happened, the American people said, oh my God, the government lied to us. Americans couldn't believe that happened. And now the government lies to everybody, expects the government to lie. 20% of the 80% of Americans believe their government then. Today, less than 20% do. And 20% believe the press because the press lies too. The only way we're going to start healing this country is if the government starts telling the truth. And that is the most important thing. I'm not going to agree with all of you. I'm going to differ with you on many, many policies. All I can tell you is I am the one president who's going to get up there, and I promise you the government is going to tell the truth to you. And I'm going to do that through national security orders. I'm going to do it through executive orders. I'm going to do it through example. And I'm going to, I'm going to make these agencies start telling the truth about everything. And again, you may not agree with me on some of my policies, but, our country is going to start healing when the government starts telling it the truth.
Damn. That was really good. And then also, that just echoes over with Trump as well. There's so many similarities there outside of just the obvious, vocal contrast. But the way that Trump, also wants to go out there and, is completely gut the deep state sounds awfully similar to what RFK is talking about by, hey man, either tell the truth or, tell your story while you're walking. So I like it. I like it a lot.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you all to our audience. We're thrilled that all of our audience and viewers could be with us for what we hope is the first of many town halls here at News Nation. Here we trust you, our audience, and we believe there's nothing more valuable than allowing you to access to...
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, but also at the same time, I'm pretty sure that one is, it looks like it's all wrapped up. Yeah, it's just a big, applause break, and then there's just some charming oriental chick at the end, I guess. I don't fucking know or anything like that, but no, that was good to listen to that, okay, and definitely get his perspective on a bunch of things. I like him more now that his positions are at least a little bit more clarified than I did probably, hey man, like even a week ago, when I already thought that he was probably the best of a very shallow pool when it comes to the Democrats. And he definitely goes right to the top. Like, I don't even know who's close, okay? Like, he's definitely, if the Democrats are... I don't think that they would schedule any sort of debates. It's basically just going to be Biden or the highway, and it'll be interesting to see what the next steps of the RFK camp is if he continues to go on the podcast tour. Sure as fuck hope so. I know Myron FNF was angling to try to get RFK on the show. That would be fucking cool, man, to just, hear him talking about a whole bunch of other things as well in a much more lax scenario than this, and, elaborate on a bunch of his policies as well. I think that'd be fucking killer, and a boy can dream, and I'd imagine it's highly likely that he did, because I think he was on PBD as well, and definitely been on Rogan. So knowing that podcasting is definitely the future, the guys who are definitely going to be making inroads, and on the GOP side, hey man, that Ron DeSantis, well, he basically gets all of his fucking checks cut by Fox News. He ain't going anywhere, but Trump could actually hop on some podcasts. That would be cool to actually hear long-form discussions with him. And, Vivek Ramaswamy, who is actually gaining in the polls time and time and time again. Like, he's up to 10% in some polls. It's a very small poll, but hey man, he's up to double digits. And Ron DeSantis, well, he's under 20. And we haven't even got to the fucking debates that are happening next month, that some indeterminate amount of time. And my prognostications that Ron DeSantis is going to end up third and Vivek's going to be second by a far distance. Seems to be coming true even earlier than I would have expected. But let me take a look at the chat. It was really nice to talk to Rookie over on the YouTube side, and really nice to talk to George. I seen Meme ended up popping through as well. And hey man, Ron, I didn't even see you in here. Been a spell, just done with work. Yo man, good to see you as well. Yeah, I hear a lot going off around me, even though I just made a big deal about this year's ban. Yeah, no, exactly. Ron, thanks for turning out, buddy. We're gonna be back on Saturday for a little bit of insight on that one. Pearl from Just Pearly Things, she has been absolutely causing a ruckus, just triggering the old trad thoughts that are on Twitter by just calling them old. because they're old and they're just spurging out right now. When she recently had an interview with another feminist on the Piers Morgan show, I think that'll be fun as fuck to go over, because I'm not exactly the biggest fan of Pearl. It's like, you know, a lady talking on men's issues like that. I don't know, man. A little touch and go, but she's the best. She's the best representative from a group that doesn't need to be involved in the space. So I like her. I like her in the sense that you can like somebody who I don't necessarily think is necessary. But hey, man, if she's going to be out there on Piers Morgan tearing down some British feminists, oh, I'm definitely going to be here for it. We're going to be breaking that down on Saturday or Sunday, but more than likely Saturday. I think I should have all my ducks in a row at that point in time. Hopefully nothing goes sideways, but over the past few weeks, weekends have been anything but straightforward. So it's nice to talk to everybody over on YouTube, chiefly Rookie, as always. And then what did we have over here on the Rumble? I seen, Meme pop in for a second. Health-wise, I don't think Biden has it in him to run another term. He's arrogant enough, I think, Meme, I think that Biden's definitely arrogant enough to try to launch another campaign for 2024. If he makes it to the end of this term or the end of that theoretical term, it definitely is left to be noticed. So don't know for sure or not, but and then what do we got here? Left in the window. My friend Congressman Boyle, but oh god, they had fucking John Fetterman is such a disaster, man. Guys who just vote blue no matter who, I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, even when it comes to, oh, excuse me, caught up for a second, but no, even people that just vote all the way down ballot when it comes to Republicans, like, even people have starting to, become a little bit wiser to the fact that if you're supporting a rhino, you're basically just supporting, just a little bit more of an avarice Democrat. So you can't just go completely down ticket anymore. You have to know your candidates. So that's why I think that it was important to go over this RFK debate, even though it was absolute viewer cancer over on YouTube. Good folks over here on Rumble, you guys really turned out, and I do appreciate that as well. And it was really nice to actually, hey, go back and forth and, talk with George. It's been a minute out there. And then for everybody else that turned up, that was just, lurking in the chat. I appreciate you guys turning out for that. So Saturday, we're going to be back with maybe something a little bit more high energy. Don't know for sure or not, but it sure as fuck seems like it's going to be a good time. So I do appreciate you guys for turning out on Independence Day. After all, happy Freedom Day to all my friends down there to the south. One of these years into the future, I'll hopefully be down there to celebrate with y'all. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.